Welcome to Inside Personal Growth Podcast. Deep dive with us as we unlock the secrets to personal development, empowering you to thrive. Here, growth isn't just a goal, it's a journey. Tune in, transform, and take your life to the next level by listening to just one of our podcasts. Welcome back to Inside Personal Growth. This is Greg Voisin, the host of Inside Personal Growth, and I have Chuck Kocher here, and Chuck is the CEO of the THE Transformation Company, and he's in Colorado Springs and Denver area. And I met him through Carrie Skiggins, who wrote a book on ownership from Durango about a company that she turned into and actually became an ESOP. And we started talking, and somehow Chuck's name came up. And then Chuck has worked with Vern Harnish, for everybody that knows, scaling. And Vern's going to be on an episode of Inside Personal Growth coming up here. Good day to you, Chuck. How you doing?
Greg, I'm doing fantastic. Great to connect again, and looking forward to our discussion.
Well, I am too, as well. And I love the statement you have by Marshall Goldsmith.
Yeah.
Got you here won't get you there. And that's what we're going to talk about, is usually you hit the glass ceiling when you're in business.
Mm-hmm.
And Chuck's going to share with us some of his experiences and how he's helped people transform their business. And I'm going to let him know a bit about you.
Yep.
The Transformation Company, as I said, is based in Colorado. It's committed to helping businesses achieve extraordinary success and sustainable transformation. Chuck's not only a high-caliber business coach, but also a renowned speaker and expert in scaling up companies. He has a distinguished track record of working with companies across various industries to propel them to new levels of financial success and operational excellence. With a passion for driving radical change, Chuck employs cutting-edge strategies and tools to help leaders and their teams exceed their business goals. And today we're going to delve into the methods, his experiences, and how he's helped transform the landscape for numerous businesses. Well, Chuck, it's a pleasure having you on Inside Personal Growth. And I know that my listeners are going to learn a lot from you. But I'd like for you to share a bit about your background and what inspired you to start the Transformation Company. How did you get into this gig, and what is it that you like about it?
Oh, my. Back in the day, I worked at corporate for 20 years. It had a couple of 10-year runs with several companies, but as I progressed through each of the companies and the second company, I started getting the bug about having my own business. And my wife and I both were in corporate jobs, and we got married later, we started our family later, and you feel like you have the handcuffs on once you have a nice income, on the corporate side. And at some point late in the 90s, it really got to a point. My wife said to me, "Hey, Chuck, you're going to become unemployable if you don't start your own business. And I'll still work for a couple more years, but I'll only be home with the kids." And she was an executive in HR when she said that to me. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to go for it. So timing's everything. Think of the tech crash and 9/11. That's when I started my coaching practice way back in the early 2000s. I looked at starting a business from scratch. I looked at buying a business, acquiring a business, and then I stumbled on business coaching. So I'm not going to, it was one of those things. I got an email, business coach. I said, ooh, that looks cool. Because everybody coming out of corporate usually goes into business consulting. And once I started looking into coaching, then I saw the premise of it, which is teaching people how to do things and transferring the IP, so they know how to do it, and really coaching them through that process. I like that. I played sports, coached my son in every sport he played, and he did scouts, all kinds of cool things. And I was coached, by an executive coach in the 90s from the Center of Creative Leadership, which is like renowned for leadership development. So I stumbled on coaching. I bought a franchise model out of Australia called Action Coach, which gave me an opportunity to learn what a coach is, how to coach, how to market, how to sell within that model. And that model was developed by Brad Sugars, he's now based in Vegas, and he's probably got I think it's over 1,200 coaches now globally. And so I was one of the first U.S. coaches to come in. And what I loved about what Brad had for me at that time is actually learn how to coach versus hanging a shingle up and saying, I'm a coach or a consultant. And so that's how I got started. And probably about 3 or 4 years in, I realized a couple of things. One, I needed more. And one of my coaches said, Chuck, read The Rockefeller Habits, which was Vern's first book. He's got a revised edition now that just hit the market, 20th anniversary edition. I read it and I go, wow, this stuff is going to take me to another level. Because I was coaching smaller businesses. Then I started graduating to larger small business in mid-market. They needed something like that versus what I had originally with Action, which again was great stuff. Loved the organization. And so I found Rockefeller Habits. And then today it's called Scaling Up. We'll talk a little bit more later about that, and started using it. And then about year 4 as a coach, I realized, Greg, that it wasn't just a cool business I started or I was going away from corporate, even though I was, but it was more, I have landed on my life purpose. I know this is what I was built to do. All the mentors I had in the corporate side that taught me how to think and build businesses and do all kinds of cool things. I was being built to be a coach. And I just loved it. I was like, wow, life purpose, work purpose, business purpose, all unified. So that was 2004.
And the transformation company that you've developed now is, it's fundamentally around those fundamental, what I want to call them, philosophies around building a business, growing a business, transforming a business. And I want to ask you a couple of questions here because, fundamentally, the philosophy about business transformation, what makes you different from general business coaching or consulting? Now, you said coaching, and I get that. That word's used all over the place. But oftentimes, our experiential learnings are the best places that we get, even when we have a coach. There's nothing wrong with coaches. We all need to have a coach. But usually for businesses, whether they're small, medium, or large, it's about the experiences that they have that actually give them that level to break through to the next level.
Yeah.
And so your company is really different because you're saying we're going to transform the culture, the people. We're going to transform. We're not just going to coach. We're going to actually help create transformation. And we aren't consultants. We're resultants. So I got a guy said, "Hey, I'm a resultant."
Yeah, there you go. I love it.
From what I do.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. So when you think of that, the context of transformation. One is, most people don't know. Like they'll say to me, "Chuck, I've got a business that's grown beyond me. I was cool when I ran it up to 10 million, but now it's 25 million. I don't know what to do. It's kind of grown beyond me." So that's an opportunity for transformation. Versus just saying, okay, sell it, get out of it, hire somebody to run it for you, type of approach. So it's really about running into those challenges or those opportunities, either one, right? And going, I don't know how I'm going to get to that next place. And usually the best way to get there is to think differently. I love that advertisement from Apple back in the late 90s. The people that really make a difference think differently. So as a coach and with transformation, I'm going to coach my client to think differently, because whatever got them here is going to get them there, like it says, right, from Marshall Goldsmith, and take them through that path of transformation.
And, that's so true. I just had Guy Kawasaki on here.
Oh,
and
cool.
Guy did an interview just week before last that we published. And, in 1997, when you say that, Apple was supposed to fall under because of Windows and Microsoft.
Uh-huh.
And they started that Think Different campaign. But here's the important thing about that Think Different campaign they took Amelia Earhart and Einstein,
Yeah.
and they said, hey, if you want to be somebody different, you have to have a Macintosh. And a Macintosh is what's going to make the difference.
Mm-hmm.
And as only Guy Kawasaki can do, he was sitting in the boardroom with Steve Jobs. This is a great story. And there was the commercial that was created by Apple to start running. And the ad agency guy said to Steve, hey, Steve, I have 2 copies of these. I'm going to give one to you and I'm going to give one to Guy. Guy's sitting there. And Steve says to the ad agency guy, no, you're going to give them both to me. And Guy's not going to get one. And Guy turned to Steve and said, hey, Steve, and you're going to love this story. What's wrong? Don't you trust me? And Steve turned to Guy Kawasaki and said, no, Guy, I don't trust you. And Guy turned to Steve and said, that's okay, Steve. I don't trust you. And the reality is, he said it cost him tens of millions of dollars. So the reality of that story was, here's the point. Sometimes in our life, no matter what business it is or life things, we have to stand up for ourselves and we have to let other people know. And actually, Steve Jobs respected people that actually stood up and spoke for themselves. Okay?
Yep.
And so this is where we come to your strategies.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of times when you're in a boardroom, it's strategic. Could you describe 1 or 2 key strategies you commonly employ when working with a new client aiming to scale their operations? What are some of the things that you do that other people maybe don't do, or if they do them, you do it differently?
Well, yeah, and we just might do it at a different level. And again, every company's going to be a little bit different because they're going to be in a certain place, if you will. But there's some tenets that you have to work on. People, the people part and the culture part are massive. And Colin says, people first. Well, you can have great people, but if you don't have strategy, it doesn't work. So you got to still work on the people side. And I find most organizations, when they get there, they may have an idea of what that is, but we teach that in, we coach that in, and we look to build a winning culture and identify the culture, because a lot of companies just kind of happen. Culture happens, right? You're going to have a culture, but is it defined? Does it have the behaviors nailed down? And is it the best place to work? Or is that what the vision is to build that? So culture is everything. It's the foundation. Next thing is people. Do you have the right talent? Do you have A players? Or do you have a bunch of friends and buddies that you started with and family and whatever it might be, but they're not necessarily A players? And if you're going to scale, you have to have a predominance of A players at the top of your organization. No matter how big you are, you got to scale that too. And Steve Jobs, by the way, talked about the value of an A-plus player. That's how his brain worked. If I have 10 A-pluses equals 30 Bs, if you will. So you have to think about that. What's an A player look like? An A player it's the performance side, it's the culture side. They live and breathe it, right? And they do the extras. They think for you. They challenge you. They push you. But that's what you want around you. You want to surround yourself. And then the tenet of leadership comes in. Are you the leader you need to be 10 years from now, 5 years from now, wherever you want to go? And where are you at? What's your lid or limitation, like you said earlier? And then we work on the leadership piece, because the owner or the partners have to raise their leadership to lift any company to any level. That has to come with the package. You cannot grow and scale without developing and working on your leadership, and it's a never-ending journey. Okay.
Well, so what you could do for our listeners is share a success story, because stories always are there, where your intervention or your company, the transformation company, helped someone else lead to a significant transformation for the client. What's a story you've got that really peaks to the top of your mind and you're like, yeah, this is a great one? What would that be?
Well, I've got a company in Australia. He had 7 years ago met the CEO in a master class I was teaching for Vern, and we struck it off. And he said, I want to scale my company, and I want to build a bunch of other companies. And this client, his name is Jake, came to me and said, but I don't know how to lead it. I'm not sure what to do with it. But I know that I've got some big dreams, big vision. to do that. And so we kind of got together and, now retro forward, he's got 5 companies and working on the 6th. He hasn't been working in the business anymore. He's gotten on top of the business where he's just working on the bigger things at the very top of the company. And he actually exited for a period of time while the companies were growing. So, but back then, Jake didn't have the culture nailed down. He had an idea what it was. He built that in, so it's a best place to work. Second thing he did is surround himself with talent. He's got amazing talent in that organization. They've got technology that blows away Amazon and some of their technologies. That's how good these guys are. But Jake said, I've got to lead, because he was the chief technologist. He was the guy that was the smartest guy in the company. So we had to help him develop his team, his leadership, and then put in the rhythms of scaling up in Rockefeller Habits, which are daily, weekly, quarterly, monthly, and annual meetings that get built into the company that keeps the company focused in on the right things. And then we got his vision clear about the 4 or 5 companies.
The transformation company, and you, Chuck, help people build systems. And most businesses that are going through, a lot of them, whether it's Michael Gerber, who used to talk about this all the time, it's like, if you want to take yourself from a small company, you have to have systems, procedures in place that can be operationally performed. Now, what are some of the common challenges businesses face when trying to transform, and how do you help them overcome these hurdles? Because there's 2 or 3 really big challenges I'm sure you can point out that most businesses are faced with. And what would you say they are, and what are the ways that our listeners could hear from you how to overcome those hurdles?
Yeah, sure. Well, one of them is the people side, is getting the right people in. And then, at some point you have to coach up or coach out some of the core leadership if they're not going to grow with you. So it's leadership, right? It's always a challenge, and getting the right people on the bus to scale the organization. Next thing is finance and accounting. What we find, and I see this in small, very small, and even mid-market companies where an accountant or a bookkeeper is doing their finances and they're a $20, $30 million company. And the CEO either understands financials enough to be dangerous or abdicates that to whoever's helping him with the financials. So teaching in and getting a hold of all the finance and accounting metrics, because you can't drive cash flow and gross margin if you don't understand your numbers. You can build the top part, revenue, and scale on that, but you could be scaling yourself out of business. We literally have seen that with companies that we come into. So financial acuity. And then there's clarity of vision and strategy. I mean, you have to have a destination. I don't care if you call it the North Star, the BHAG, the big, hairy, audacious goal, as Jim Collins calls it, but you have to have a destination, whether it's 5 years or 10 years. What's that big thing that's out there that's going to stretch you to greatness? And then once you have that, get real clear what it is, literally write a book on it or create a visual on what the company looks like in that period when you achieve it. And then it comes down to strategy. What are the right strategies that you need to deploy to differentiate your company, attract the very best talent, move into different markets, maybe acquire other companies? There's so many elements of strategy. It's going to be different for different companies, but those are some of the things we've done to help companies transform.
Those are great. The question I would say, and maybe the listeners have, is, a lot of times people get jolted and they get going on a new track, just like you said about your business in Australia, then the guy left. How do you help companies make sure that whatever you're implementing is sustainable and has a long-term benefit for them?
Yeah.
Because this is something, whether your guy who was the CEO who founded that was there or not, it has to run whether he's there or not. And these systems and procedures have to stay in place to keep it sustainable.
Right. Well, the value of any company goes up a magnitude when the CEO is redundant. That's something I've learned over the years. So how do we do that? It's all about discipline and focus. When you think of sports, the very best athletes in the world, whatever sport, it really doesn't matter, have discipline and focus. They don't just get there, win a tournament, win the World Series or the Super Bowl. There's discipline and focus. And so within scaling up, we have those disciplines and focuses that are proven across the globe, cuts across for-profit, nonprofit. We've got things in government that work. It's all about discipline and focus. We bring the framework, we teach it in, and it becomes a rhythm within how they run their organization. And that's how you get sustainability, not jumping from this bright, shiny object to another, which some people do. They can't sit, they're not disciplined. But the greatest companies in the world have discipline and focus. There's not one that got there by luck or they won the lottery. They have discipline and focus. Even Richard Branson, with all the companies that he's had Branson on, the branded companies and the companies that he's ran over the years, had discipline and focus.
And I would add to that it's commitment, grit, determination.
Yeah.
Because with that, that's what that's creating. In other words, you got to have a purpose. So everybody's got a purpose. You got a vision, and then the goals come. And then as long as you have the grit and determination and you don't give up too early, you're going to be a success. Now, a big part of business transformation is, as you said, leadership. You saw Steve Jobs. We talked about him a bit. Maybe some leaders have different personality styles in the way they lead. We see that all the time. But what qualities do you believe are essential for effective leadership in a rapidly growing company? That is the key. We need to know. Most of my listeners out there are coming from LinkedIn. All the companies are growing. If they say if you're ripe, you're rotten. You're not growing at this point. Everyone is trying to grow. The question is, what are the qualities of the leaders I need? You've already mentioned A-plus players. I get that. But where would you, Chuck, say are the essential qualities that I need to have in leadership in my company?
Well, first of all, will, commitment, that we need to, as a leader in the 21st century, you have to be authentic. You have to have emotional intelligence. That's a huge quality for leadership. You have to set the bar. You have to be willing to do whatever it takes to example that back into your company. And you have to be able to build connection with the people you work with, whether it's a remote company or, in a brick and mortar. So those are some big things. And then there's accountability. Can you and will you hold not just yourself, but others accountable and do it in a way where it's not demotivating, if you will? I don't think you need to be a Tony Robbins. I think you have to build, hire people in that have the self-drive, and I also think in leadership, you have to always be willing to work on yourself. You have to be humble, be willing to learn from your mistakes. And because if you've arrived as a leader, you'll never get hired into any organizations we work with. We work with people that are growing, learning, know they're on a journey, if you will. So those are some tenets that I think.
I also would add, and I know you've heard plenty of great speeches, but the Bill Gateses of the world and the Steve Jobs of the world and the Warren Buffetts of the world have always said that one of their best things that they developed was their intuition, and they followed their intuition. And I'd like to add that for all those business leaders out there, if you've got a hunch, and that's where this question's going, and you really feel strong about it, follow it. Because based on your experience, Chuck, what trends do you see shaping the future of business transformation? Because today we live in a world that's dynamic, always on, fast-paced, lots of changes happening rapidly. Technology is transforming all of us at such a rapid speed. Here you are sitting at an age pretty close to me. What are you going to recommend to people that are growing a business? And we see this massive, massive shift and change in almost everything we do, from AI to you name it. It's out there.
Yeah, well, I think, you just named a few, right? The technology convergence that's going on everywhere and in every way, shape, and fashion in every industry. There's not one that's not being affected. AI is at the tip of the iceberg. We don't know, but we're learning, and companies are starting to deploy it as we speak. You also have generational things going on with people that you really have to pay attention to, because think about it. Everybody's talking about Gen Z right now, this moment, right? Because that's the younger gen. But then the alphas are coming up, which are 14 and under, another generation right before it. So you have multiple generations at an unprecedented number of them in the workplace today that want and need different things. So you have to really, as you sculpt your company, scale your organization, you got to be aware of that. You have to connect with it. You can't just be a hierarchical leader that we had in the previous century that was built upon military principles from World War I and World War II. So as you look at the people side, we have unbelievable dynamics going on. You have the remote work. So can you work? Can you build a company? And I have virtual companies. Nobody's in a brick and mortar other than their own home or work facility, but they're remotely built. And that's a dynamic now you have to pay attention to. The other thing is economics. Lily, by looking at your phone this moment, you know about the economics, not just here, all over the world, and they're affecting things. Competition comes from not just local, it's everywhere and anybody, if you will. And those are some things that are at play here. But if you're smart and you differentiate what you have and you connect into whatever part of that generational change that I talked about and have something that actually does what it says it does, and you back it up with a big brand promise, you're going to be successful. You're going to be very successful.
What advice would you have for young entrepreneurs starting out where, what we've just talked about sometimes seems hard to grasp? It's like a fire hose and I have no bandwidth. Here I am with all this coming at me, and they see it as opportunity, yet sometimes they get bogged down with their dream because there's all these little things that are affecting them psychologically, emotionally, right? And we know that every entrepreneur goes through this. I've been through it. I've started up 5 or 6 or 7 companies, and we are not always on an even keel emotionally. As a coach, what do you tell people to get through the toughest times in their lives, which is growing a young startup company into something of substance?
Well, I mean, I coach the Gen Zers. I've got a company in Singapore. The average age is 24. Okay. And they started something up and they are now scaling like crazy. So again, it goes back to what I said earlier, right? What's your passion? What's your purpose? And purpose today is different, than it was maybe 30 years ago. Purpose is about making a difference in society, in a community, and knowing what that is always going to give them that line of sight to do what they want to do. Second thing is you have to stay within, we're going to call it, the guardrails. And once you decide what your strategy is, you can't keep jumping around. And a new company has to do a lot of, they have to go out and explore, test, and measure. But at some point, you have to lock in on that and go for it. You cannot just randomly, hope it happens. So what we advise always, and I advise this all the time to I love coaching the younger gen because they think differently than I ever did when I was their age, and I love it. I love it because they come up with new ideas. They challenge everything, right? But the big thing with that is, does that challenge turn into something substantial in a product or a solution that's meaningful towards that market that they're targeting? And a lot of people just want to sell. One guy said to me, Chuck, I'm going to sell to 6 billion people. I said, no, that's not a core customer. So locking in with the products and services and that customer and doing it differently, not like the competition, separating yourself from the competition. That is always going to win in any market. And the companies that do that always get massive scale and then go on to great things. And you can see it with all the cool companies we have out there now. They started just like you said, in a garage or in the basement,
right,
online or in a Starbucks.
Well, it's great advice and wisdom that you've provided the listeners. And so this is a show on personal growth, and everything that you've mentioned so far is about our willingness to be curious, investigate, and always learning, always on, always learning. And what I want to find out, and this is our wrap up this interview, how has your journey from where you started in corporate to then coming on with scaling up and meeting Vern and going through all the experiences transformed or impacted your own personal growth?
Oh, wow. Well, I mean, I exist to help people be their very best, and that means I have to be my very best. And to see the success that the companies have had, whether they've been sold, handed on to the sixth generation or the third generation, or to the employees, if you will, or the owner sells and now they're off in Tahiti, pursuing a new passion. That's why I exist. So when I started, I wasn't sure how that was all going to happen. But over the years and my continual learning, my mentors that I've been connected to over the years and still am, has helped me see things differently. But just knowing that I've made a difference and I can look and say, wow, look what that company's doing for their community. Look what they're doing for their country, if you will. That's all I care about, to give my best, help them be their best. And the best satisfaction, Greg, that I ever get is that person saying, Chuck, I couldn't have done it without your coaching. I can't thank you enough. You've changed my life, not just my business. And that's why I exist, and I love it, and I'm going to do it as long as God lets me.
Well, that's a great testament to who you are and what you do. And I want to thank you for being on Inside Personal Growth, sharing some of your stories, some of your wisdom, talking with my listeners about what it is you do. For my listeners, there'll be a link in the show notes. It's called thetransformationcompany.com. There you can learn more about Chuck. You can learn more about his offerings and what he does. You can learn about his integration, or I should say his collaboration with Vern Harnish. Chuck, you've been a fantastic guest on the show. Thank you for your time and your inspiration and your energy and your insights about how to scale up a business, how to transform a business, and most importantly, how people can stay inspired in spite of some of the challenges they're going to face running their businesses. It's been a pleasure having you on.
Greg, I can't thank you enough. It was wonderful just to, talk about entrepreneurship and scale and stuff like that. And thank you so much for allowing me to come on your podcast.
Namaste, my friend. Have a good rest of your day.
Cheers, man. Take care.
Thank you for listening to this podcast on Inside Personal Growth. We appreciate your support. And for more information about new podcasts, please go to InsidePersonalGrowth.com or any of your favorite channels to listen to our podcast. Thanks again, and have a wonderful day.